So our first speaker, as you can see from the slide, is Louise McHugh. Louise is Professor of Psychology here at UCD, where she is the Deputy Head of Department, and I would be lost without her. Her research interests are in the area of process-based therapy and relational frame therapy, intervention development and farmer mental health. And I know I'm really interested to hear her talk about this stream of research this morning. She's a founding member of the Agri Mental Health team here at UCD, and current projects in this area on farmer mental health are funded by NOSP, who's been mentioned as part of Barbara's research this morning, the FBD Trust, the Department for Agriculture, Food and Marine, and the Environmental Protection Agency. So Louise, over to you.
So yeah, delighted to be here talking to my home team and community. Just a trigger warning for the talk, I will be making reference to suicide and suicidal ideation. So I've done many journals and many talks now. We kind of start with the positionality statement just to ensure that there's sort of an awareness of the biases that I might bring to the research that I do. Oftentimes when I'm here talking to the School of Psychology, I'm talking about acceptance and commitment therapy and relational frame theory. I am a contextual behavioural scientist, and the philosophy of science that I do my work from is functional contextualism, which means I look at how the situation impacts and the context impacts behaviour. So of course everything that I do, even though this isn't relational frame theory and acceptance and commitment therapy, is through the lens of the blinkers of my history, as much and all as I would like and hope that I do not let those biases influence me. So the stream of research that I wanted to talk to you about today is a stream of research that I've gotten interested in the last couple of years. I have a module in third year that's an elective, How to Change Behaviour. So a colleague of mine, Dr. Tomás Russell from the School of Agricultural Science, started to be sending students over to that module increasingly because they were interested in the topic of mental health, behaviour change, the impact of environmental policies on the farmers and the farming community. So then Tomás Russell and I got talking about the fact that we should really do some research on this, and at that time the National Organisation for Suicide Prevention put out a call where they specifically mentioned farmers as a group of interest. So we got the small amount of funding from them to start us off on this project. It was 38,000, and we Alison Stapleton came on board as a research assistant for the project at that time. So then, Marky and Tomás Russell for Agricultural Science and myself and Alison Stapleton were the beginning of this group that have now become, with more people, the Agri Mental Health team at UCD. So this specific study that I'm looking at that we ran when we had that initial phase of the NOS funding, we wanted to do a nationwide survey, and we also did focus groups and interviews looking at the status of the issue in Ireland at the moment around suicidal ideation, around mental health, the stressors on farmers, and just understanding the context in Ireland. So in this first study then we had 256 farmers in the nationwide survey, and then the areas on the map that are in green are where there were more participants who completed the survey. Then we had 30-minute semi-structured interviews with farmers, and then we had 3 sets of focus groups where we tried out some intervention techniques to look at the acceptability of future interventions that might support the community. So the findings were, as commented by a lot of people in the sector, stark but not surprising. We found that 23.4% of farmers of the 256 that we surveyed were considered at risk for suicide. And that meant that on items that reflected on the past 2 weeks, had they had thoughts of or ideation about. So this was quite a significantly alarming finding that we wanted to understand more about. In looking at the mental health of the farming community from the nationwide survey, we saw that 55.5% of the farmers that responded were experiencing moderate to extremely severe depression. 44.1% of the farmers that we surveyed were experiencing moderate to severe anxiety. And 37.9% of farmers were experiencing moderate to extremely severe stress. In looking at this, in the survey, we also, we were looking at stress and what links to suicidal ideation for the farming community. Farm stress was associated with higher suicidal ideation and higher distress levels generally. And among the farmers, there were some psychological skills that we did identify that seemed to be potentially protective when considering to move forward in developing interventions for the farming community. And that was that psychological flexibility seemed to be linked to higher levels of well-being, or if you like, lower levels of well-being was linked to the flip side of that, which is avoidance of emotions as a coping strategy broadly. So we asked the farmers what words would you use to describe your relationship or attachment with the farm. And what we found was that it is sort of, it's complicated, the words that come up from that. So we see words like strong and good and commitment and connected. But we've also got words like responsibility, complicated, intense, stressful, etc. So we're sort of seeing that there's stressors on the farming community and that there is pressures on their mental health from the people that we surveyed. That was also reflected in the interviews and focus groups that we conducted. We also asked in the survey, we asked the farmers about the top 3 stressors that were impacting them at the moment. And the top 3 stressors that came out were first of all, government policies designed to reduce climate change. And in particular, what the respondents were saying was that their perception that their voice was not involved in the development of policies that they had then to implement. Outsiders not understanding the nature of the farm, and in this kind of context, really feeling very scapegoated in the media around issues to do with climate change in a way that was, sort of disproportionately being represented their impact in their perception of it than other groups, and then not being seen as the same kind of respected members of the community as they once held. Being a farmer is very much a part of the identity of the farmer. It's very much a big part of their life. Attachment to the farm is something that's very complicated. So then when there is this sort of displacement from the respect of the farming community, then for them that's a massive challenge to their identity, sense of place and community, etc. We looked at whether there was differences between farm holders and people who own farm versus non-farm holders. And we saw that farm holders reported higher suicidal ideation and higher distress than non-farm holders. So as we said then, the farmer's relationship with the land is complicated, and when we looked at farm attachment and how that relates to well-being, we saw that farm attachment is associated with lower levels of well-being. And this could be particularly in the structural context where there is challenges to the position of farmers in the society and we're feeling respected or scapegoated, as they have said themselves. So then this attachment is going to be even more challenging amid these stressors. Took out some quotes from the interviews that I thought might illuminate and put sort of beating heart behind some of the data that we're reporting there in kind of stats, if you like. So here's one. Land gets in the lad's mind like on his own all day and thinking about it. He's just going to snap at some stage. I mightn't even read the last sentence of that because it might be a little bit alarming. If you look at the media in the last couple of months, like we have been used as a scapegoat for climate change and all that. We're being nearly hit with a stick that you have to fall into place and do what you're being told to do. There's an awful disconnect from what's happening in relation to rural Ireland, and that's having an outrageous effect on the mental health of farmers, definitely younger farmers, because people are toying with their futures. Whereas a farmer, you're expected to get on with things as such. You're expected to be, I suppose, physically strong and mentally strong as well. You become desperate to just keep the farm enterprise going when it's really, I suppose, not viable anymore. So what I hope I've sort of gone through there is sort of showing you this new sort of area of research in the past couple of years. This has led to the build-up of the Agri mental health team, and an area that needs a lot more understanding, even in terms of the sector. Is it dairy, is it sheep farmers, those are different stresses for different groups. I wanted to sort of mention impact in this because I think when I started in UCD 12 years ago, I think the two things that I found difficult to be able to figure out were, how do I get my research to impact, to knowledge transfer, to being able to make policy change, and also I think, you know, where do you get funding that isn't the Irish Research Council or the Health Research Board? So I think this particular stream has sort of illuminated a couple of those things for me. So when we did this, Alison Stapleton's very interested in knowledge transfer, we used the communications office in UCD, and they did a press release for us. And I'd never thought to do that before. I'm sure many of you have done this and do this all the time. I hadn't. And it really had a massive snowball effect, the press release. You know, there's all of those places there. They've got us onto Ear to the Ground. They got us out into the Irish Times, other places there. But more importantly, when that got picked up, the Minister for Agriculture in one of the subcommittees, and Minister Martin Hayden, contacted us, having seen it in the media, got in touch with us, met us, asked us to comment on what they should be putting into the funding call for farmer mental health, really getting a seat at the table in that. From that, one of the MEPs, Maria Walsh, invited us over to Europe to talk at a farmer mental health policy meeting. So really, just from that press release, getting it out there and actually making people hear you're doing this stuff, it really can make a difference. Okay, so the future directions from this research, that where we want to go now is we want to start to develop interventions to support farmers, and we really need to support them from help seeking, and there's a group in DCU that are doing great work on help seeking. We want to look at prevention. How can we get into the water some of these messages and these key psychological skills that could be of use early? And then we also need to understand early intervention and recovery. So, and there's different people that will be delivering those. The farming community, like a member of the farming community, to deliver stuff to them, like their advisors who understand them. So it's important then, when we're getting it into the water and prevention, to have that. But then on the flip side, of course, when we need to have, you know, trained mental health professionals dealing with people who are at the point of, you know, suicidalization, or in the area of recovery, severe depression or anything like that. So we want to be able to develop tailored interventions for each phase of prevention, early intervention and recovery. And also, we want to acknowledge that there are structural issues that are putting stress on the farming community. So not just saying, oh, well, we'll help you with psychological skills, but ignore the fact that these massive pressures structurally on you. So in line with that then, now we have secured funding to kind of hopefully go on a couple of sides of this. We have funding now to develop interventions in the recovery space, and Martin O'Connor is a clinical psychologist who's involved in this as well, and that was from the National Organisation for Suicide Prevention, and the FBD Trust matched that funding so that to be able to get a postdoctoral researcher and a clinical psychologist to work on this. We also got funding in the space of the early intervention from the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine to be able to now in the next 4 years to develop those evidence-based, culturally competent interventions. And more recently, recently as well, we got funding, secured funding from the Environmental Protection Agency, which I think is one I hadn't thought of before I applied to them, but definitely listening to people's research interest today, is a funding body that would be of interest and fund some of the research that people are interested in peace, etc. And we secured funding for that to look at connecting farmers and policymakers when policy change is being made. So including the voice of farmers in policies that are going to impact their life, their mental health, their communities, their attachment and their sense of place. So I've come to the end of my talk, but I would love to talk more about this too.